There is a silence in your soul you cannot name. You sit in a room, white walls, soft chair. A stranger listens, nods, writes something down, and still you feel like something is missing. Week after week, year after year, you're taught to excavate your past, to process emotions, to cope. But what if the answer was never buried? What if the answer wasn't to look back, but to stand still and see clearly? 2,000 years ago, there were no couches, no diagnoses, no pills to numb the ache of existence. But there was fire, there was reason, there were men, broken, bloodied, betrayed, who stood before empires and chose strength over sympathy. Marcus Aurelius lost children and buried friends, but he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Epictetus was born a slave, crippled, beaten, and still declared, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Now ask yourself, which feels more powerful? This is not a dismissal of therapy. This is not a war. This is a mirror, a confrontation, a test of fire. When the soul aches, we must not only understand it, we must command it. What if the cure isn't comfort, but confrontation? Modern therapy tells you express, talk, process, heal. Stoicism whispers, endure, rise, conquer. And in between those two voices is you. You, the warrior forgotten beneath layers of trauma. You, the flame beneath the ashes of overanalysis. You, the soul who has been told too many times, it's okay to be broken, and not enough times, you were built to rise. We are not anti-feeling. We are anti-drowning. Emotions are waves, but you are the shore. You don't chase each wave. You don't scream at the ocean. You stand still and let the storm pass, because storms always pass. The Stoics knew this. That's why they didn't run from pain. They stared it down. You don't need saving. You need sharpening. Think about the men we admire most in history, the ones who moved the world without asking it for permission. Did they seek comfort, or did they command clarity? Lincoln led through civil war, not self-care. Edison failed thousands of times but never scheduled a session to process his failures. He learned from them. Carnegie was born in poverty and built a fortune not by journaling his inner child, but by believing in his future self. Pain didn't paralyze them, it sculpted them. What therapy often treats as dysfunction, Stoicism reframes as fuel. Anxiety? It's your brain trying to prepare for what matters. Depression? Perhaps your soul is grieving a life unlived. Anger? The fire you haven't yet pointed in the right direction. Stoicism doesn't numb you. It wakes you. Not everything needs healing. Some things need hardening. Some wounds are meant to remind, not disappear. Some scars are earned and necessary because they say, "I lived. I survived. I will not be moved." Therapy asks, "How do you feel?" Stoicism asks, "What will you do despite how you feel?" There's a difference. We live in a time where comfort is currency, but comfort never forged greatness. You were not made for perpetual ease. You were made for struggle with purpose, for fire with meaning, for hardship that refines your soul. Marcus Aurelius faced plague, war, betrayal. Every page of his meditations is soaked in pain, and yet, never once does he collapse into victimhood. He writes, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Modern therapy may say, "Avoid your triggers." Stoicism says, "Master them." It's not about bottling pain, it's about transcending it. Feeling deeply, yes, but not being ruled by those feelings. You are not your past. You are not your pain. You are not your diagnosis, your fear, your inner child, your trauma response. You are the one who sees all of it and still moves forward. You are not broken. You are becoming. When Epictetus was beaten by his master until his leg shattered, he simply said, "I warned you it would break." He did not cry. He did not beg. He did not crumble. He accepted the pain but never gave it power. That's the essence of Stoicism. You do not control the world, but you always control yourself. No matter the loss, no matter the heartbreak, no matter the weight of your darkest days. This world will not slow down to soothe you. Life does not stop when you're overwhelmed. Keeps going. The question is, will you keep going with it? Will you rise without needing a reason? Will you face what haunts you without asking for applause? Will you sit in the fire and choose to forge yourself in it? You don't need endless analysis. You need action. You don't need labels. You need discipline. You don't need to be told you're valid. You need to remember you're capable. Modern methods tell you how to cope. Stoicism dares you to transcend. And right now you have a choice. Will you keep circling your pain? Or will you stand up and give it direction? The modern world tells you to feel safe. But safety has never created greatness. The Stoics did not seek safe spaces. They carved strength from chaos. They understood what many forget. The only true peace is earned. The kind of peace that comes from knowing, deep in your bones, that no matter what happens out there, you are unshaken within. You are not glass. You are granite. You don't need someone to carry your burden. You need to become the kind of person who can carry it and then carry more. Because life will add weight. Storms will come. People will fail you. Death, loss, betrayal, injustice. These are not anomalies. These are the rules of the world. And when you stop expecting ease, you start unlocking your edge. We keep asking, why me? The Stoics asked, why not me? It is not the adversity that breaks you. It is your belief that you shouldn't be facing it. Seneca lost wealth, status, and eventually his life. But even as Nero demanded his death, Seneca did not tremble. He opened his veins and faced mortality with grace. That is not detachment. That is dominion. That is the level of self-command we are all capable of. But we have been softened by comforts. We have been seduced by the idea that understanding a problem is solving it. That naming our trauma is taming it. That awareness alone will deliver us from pain. But awareness is not the finish line. It is the starting bell. Therapy at its best is a mirror. Stoicism is the sword you wield once you've seen who you really are. You don't conquer yourself by endlessly tending to your wounds. You conquer yourself by standing, bleeding, and still walking forward. That's not suppression. That's supremacy over the self. Your mind is not a problem to be solved. It is a kingdom to be governed. Your thoughts are not wild animals to be tamed. They are your army, waiting for orders. But if you abdicate your throne, they will revolt. Modern advice says, talk about your thoughts. Stoicism says, command them. Your life bends not to your therapist, not to your emotions, not even to your pain. It bends to your decisions. Will you train your emotions or be trained by them? Will you act according to your mood or according to your mission? That's the line in the sand. The Stoics remind you that you don't need to wait until you're healed to take action. You don't need to wait until you feel ready to rise. The path is forged by walking. And every step you take, with doubt still in your lungs, with pain still in your heart, is proof of your power. There is no savior coming. You are it. No mentor, no guru, no program, no perfect childhood can replace the moment you decide, I will not be a slave to my past another second. You were not born to be analyzed. You were born to act. You were not built to merely understand yourself. You were built to master yourself. You were not made to sit in a room asking, why am I like this? Forever. You were made to walk into the world and say, I will decide who I become. There's a warrior buried under the overthinking. There's a king or queen inside your indecision. There's a storm tamer within your storms. But you have to stop negotiating with your lower self. You have to stop worshiping the pain. Stop labeling the struggle as an identity. You are not your anxiety. You are not your depression. You are not your grief. These are visitors, not rulers. You do not owe them your throne. Take it back. Modern methods may soothe the surface. Stoicism reforges the soul. And that is what you were born for. You weren't made for smallness. You weren't made for comfort. You weren't made to be explained. You were made to be unstoppable. There is a place in you that knows this, that still burns, that aches for the battlefield of the soul, for the mountain climb of character, For the iron discipline that silences doubt, that silences weakness, that silences every voice that ever told you you're too broken. You are not too broken. You are just too comfortable. And it is comfort, not pain, that is your true enemy. Because pain wakes you up. Pain is a signal, a flare, a message from the divine saying, there is more inside you. Wake up. Go deeper. Stop settling. You don't need a new technique. You need to remember your ancient strength. You don't need more words. You need will. Because the only true therapy is to live so fiercely, so purposefully, that your past no longer has a grip on your present. To become so intentional in every step, every breath, every choice, that the weight you used to carry becomes the foundation beneath your rise. Do not misinterpret this fire. This is not a denial of pain. It is not the arrogance of pretending emotions don't exist. No, this is the reverence of facing the full spectrum of being human without flinching. The Stoics did not ignore their suffering. They observed it, understood it, transcended it. Pain is not the enemy. Your relationship to pain is. You've been taught to flee discomfort, to categorize your suffering, to wrap every ache in soft words and psychological profiles. But what if your discomfort was a compass? What if your restlessness was not a disorder, but a signal? A divine push from the soul saying, this isn't where you're meant to stay. You were not meant to stay in survival mode. You were meant to rise into sovereignty. That is the Stoic path. To govern yourself not just in calm, but in chaos. To meet life not with fragile hope, but with unbreakable clarity. You don't need to find yourself. You need to forge yourself. And forging requires fire. Steel is not born in therapy, it's born in trial. Now imagine this, two people wake to the same tragedy. One spirals into analysis, into why me, into childhood echoes and emotional loops. The other breathes, accepts, steps forward. They do not deny the weight, but they carry it with power. That is not emotional suppression. That is emotional command. That is the Stoic advantage. And it is available to you right now. You don't need to be told you're enough. You need to prove it to yourself every morning, every evening, every hour between. Not through words, through action. Virtue is not a thought. It's a practice. Discipline is not a mood. It's a decision. Resilience is not inherited. It is earned. You must move even when you doubt. You must act even when you ache. Because every action is a vote for the kind of person you are becoming. And each day you cast thousands of votes. Not in public, but in silence. In the privacy of your thoughts. In the stillness of your routines. In the way you respond when the world is not watching. Therapy might help you understand your patterns. But Stoicism demands that you break them. Not tomorrow. Not after a breakthrough. Now, the ancient world had no therapists, but it had philosophers. And those philosophers bled. They suffered. They buried children, endured exile, faced plague and famine, and still they held to reason. They refused to be shaken by what they could not control. Instead, they controlled what mattered, their response. And that is still the only power you ever truly own. Control your response, and you control your life. This is not a motivational slogan. It's physics. The world moves. People disappoint. Plans fall apart. That's reality. But your mind, your soul, that's your fortress. And no one enters it without your permission, unless you leave the gate open. So shut it. Secure it. Stand at the helm of your life like a captain on a storm-tossed ship. Do not beg for calmer seas. Become the better sailor. Do not pray for the storm to stop. Learn to love the wind. The modern world is noisy, and it will sell you 1,000 methods, 1,000 ways to self-soothe, self-validate, self-medicate. But few will look you in the eye and say what you truly need to hear. Enough comfort. Enough excuse. Enough waiting. It's time to rise. Because you don't need another session to explain your fear. You need to walk into it. And not to prove anything to anyone else, but because the soul cannot grow unless it is tested. The same way muscle tears and rebuilds stronger, your spirit grows not through avoidance, but through confrontation. And you must confront your weakness, not with hatred, but with holy urgency. You must say to yourself, this ends with me. This cycle of victimhood, of stagnation, of quiet despair. It ends now, because you've seen the cost of staying soft. You've felt the ache of living beneath your potential. You've tasted the bitterness of knowing what you're capable of, and not acting on it. No more. This is where you stop explaining your pain, and start exercising your power. This is where you stop waiting to feel ready, and start moving as if you already are. This is where the ancient and the modern part ways. Where one seeks comfort, the other seeks conquest of the self. So ask yourself, do you want to be understood, or do you want to be unshakable? Do you want a soothing story, or a soul forged in steel? Because this world will offer you both. But only one will change you. The war you're fighting is not external. It never was. The true battleground lies between your ears, beneath your ribs, in the invisible war zone of thoughts and impulses, of fear and courage, of instinct and reason. And every single day that war is waged, quietly, in the choices you make when no one is looking. You don't lose your greatness in one moment. You leak it one compromise at a time. You know what that voice sounds like? The one that says, skip it just for today. The one that says, you're not ready. The one that whispers, it's too much. You're too tired. What's the point? That voice isn't your enemy. It's your training partner. Because the Stoics didn't fear their darkness. They used it. They didn't try to silence the voice of doubt. They answered it with discipline. That's the difference. Modern methods may teach you to negotiate with your mind. The Stoics teach you to command it. You don't calm the storm by sitting in it and meditating on the rain. You become the eye of the storm, the stillness that holds the chaos without becoming it. Because let's tell the truth, healing isn't always soft. Sometimes it looks like getting up at 5 a.m. when you don't want to. Sometimes it sounds like saying no when it would be easier to people please. Sometimes it feels like taking the hard path when every part of you screams for comfort. This is the forgotten medicine, discipline. Modern methods may validate your pain. Stoicism tells you, don't stop there. Validate your strength. Yes, you've been through hell, but you didn't stay there. You walked out carrying fire. And now, you have a responsibility. Not just to feel better, but to be better. Not just to talk about growth, but to embody it. Not just to seek answers, but to live them with unwavering intensity. Because the people around you, they don't need another broken mirror of pain. They need to see someone who rose anyway, who faced the same darkness, and chose to light a torch. You were not made to echo your suffering forever. You were made to transcend it so others might follow. This is legacy. Not what you leave behind in wealth or fame, but in strength of character. In how deeply you lived your values. In how unshakably you held the line, when life pushed against you the hardest. That's what Stoicism was always about, virtue. Not comfort, not control, not healing in the modern sense, but excellence of soul. Living according to reason, acting in accordance with nature, holding yourself to a standard so high that even death bows to your integrity. Because there is no legacy without suffering. There is no strength without opposition. There is no peace without power over self. The Stoics understood this. That's why they trained for death, not in morbid obsession, but in joyful detachment. Memento mori, remember that you will die, not as a threat, but as a liberation. Because when you truly grasp the brevity of life, you stop wasting it. You stop overthinking. You stop blaming. You stop seeking permission. You act. You take ownership not just of your choices, but of your mind, your emotions, your reactions. You become sovereign. And in a world of chaos, sovereignty is salvation. Therapy might help you understand how the past shaped you. Stoicism asks, what will you do now that you know? That's the moment of transformation. Not when you're finally okay, but when you look your pain in the eye and say, I see you, but I bow to something greater. Reason, virtue, purpose. You don't wait to feel confident. You move with courage anyway. You don't wait to stop hurting. You build strength inside the pain. Because the soul doesn't evolve through understanding alone. It evolves through action, through friction, through radical self-command. And you, right now, are at the edge of that command. Every hesitation you've coddled, every excuse you've rehearsed, every pattern you've justified, let them burn. Because beneath all of that is you, not the version the world created, the version you choose to become. And that is where the ancient wisdom wins. The wisdom of the ancients wasn't theory. It was blood-earned truth. It was tested on battlefields, in prisons, in exile, in sickness, in grief. It was shaped not in sterile classrooms but in the furnace of real life, where children died, where empires fell, where men were betrayed, slandered, hunted, and still stood tall. Modern minds often confuse comfort with clarity. But clarity is not soft. Clarity is a blade, and it cuts through everything false. Your excuses, your fears, your fragile narratives. Clarity demands sacrifice. The sacrifice of who you were, for who you must become. The Stoics never promised you relief. They promised you freedom. And freedom does not come from being understood. Freedom comes from being undeniably disciplined. You don't master your mind by nurturing it like a wounded child. You master it by building it into a warrior. A mind that doesn't react, but responds. A mind that doesn't chase peace, but creates it. A mind that doesn't need the world to change, because it has already conquered itself. And isn't that what you crave? Not just to cope, but to command? Not just to survive, but to dominate the very terrain of thought and feeling? Not just to process, but to prevail? Because let's face it, deep down, you know this. All the labels in the world can't replace the raw, sacred act of choosing your response in the face of chaos. That is where real confidence is born. Not in being told you are okay, but in knowing you are unbreakable because you have chosen to be. And that choice is not made once. It's made daily. It's made in the silence before dawn when the alarm goes off and the bed is warm. It's made when the anger rises and you choose stillness over shouting. It's made when the temptation calls and you answer with integrity. It's made when life hits you with wave after wave, and you do not flinch. Because every time you do that, you don't just build character, you reveal it. And that is the deepest truth Stoicism ever offered. You already have what you need. Not later. Not when you're healed. Not when the trauma is gone. Not when the fear subsides. Now, you are already whole. Not because you're perfect, but because you have the power to live by principle, not by pain. You can choose virtue over validation, discipline over drama, excellence over ease. And that choice, that is the cure. Not a session, not a sedative, not another self-help book. A decision. Because when Marcus Aurelius said, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think," he wasn't being poetic. He was reminding you that your time is a battlefield, and every moment you hesitate is a moment lost forever. So tell me, what are you still waiting for? Permission? A sign? Perfect day? They don't exist. There is only this moment. And you, awake, alert, alive in it, have the power to burn the old scripts, the old narratives, the old identities to the ground and step forward as the ruler of your fate. Because the Stoic doesn't wait to feel like a king to wear the crown. The Stoic puts on the crown and acts like it until he becomes it. You don't become strong by being told you are. You become strong by acting strong when you feel weakest. You don't become wise by reading alone. You become wise by living with wisdom, even when it costs you comfort, popularity, or certainty. You don't become stoic by watching videos or quoting philosophers. You become stoic by staring your suffering in the eye and refusing to kneel. That is the therapy of the ancients. That is the fire they left behind for us to find. And now that it's in your hands, what will you do with it? You don't need another answer. You need conviction. You've gathered enough insights. You've listened, watched, absorbed, reflected. You've filled journals and sessions and endless inner monologues trying to make sense of what hurt you. But now it's time to move. It's time to leave the cave of contemplation and walk into the arena of action. Because nothing will change until you change the way you meet life. Not just on your best days, but on your worst. Not when the conditions are ideal, but when everything is against you. And that's the final frontier. To act with courage when you feel fear. To speak with clarity when the world is noise. To choose what is right when everything in you wants to retreat. That's Stoicism. That's mastery. And that's what therapy often forgets. You are not your wound. Yes, you were hurt. Yes, you were broken. Yes, you carry stories stitched into your skin. But those stories are not your cage. They are your origin. Not an excuse to stay small, but a fire to grow tall. You don't need a diagnosis to understand yourself. You need standards to rise above yourself. And the Stoics gave us those standards. Justice, courage, wisdom, temperance. For pillars, not to decorate your mind, but to carry the weight of your existence. Therapy may say, let's revisit the wound. Stoicism says, let's rebuild the warrior. It's a different lens. Not a denial, a demand. To not stop at self-awareness. To not settle at emotional safety. To not cling to healing like it's the final destination. Because healing is not the end goal. Honor is. You were born to live with honor. To leave this world cleaner, stronger, braver than you found it. To write your name not just in history, but in eternity with the way you loved, the way you endured, the way you refused to bow to chaos. That's what Marcus Aurelius did. That's what Epictetus did. That's what every unnamed soul who rose from nothing and became something did. They didn't wait for help. They became the help. They didn't look for saviors. They became the standard. And now that standard belongs to you. You don't need to live like everyone else. You don't need to think like everyone else. You don't need to talk, behave, or believe like everyone else. You are not here to blend in. You are here to rise up. So do it. Not with noise. With nerve. Not with applause. With alignment. Not with pride. With principle. You are not broken. You are not sick. You are not stuck. You are standing on the edge of the life you were meant to live, and the only thing between you and it is you. Not your past. Not your pain. Not your trauma. Just the version of you that won't let go of the comfort, the identity, the story that keeps you soft. Let it die. Let the old self burn. Let the victim in you scream and fade into the fire. Let the soft voice of hesitation go silent. And in its place, hear the voice that was there all along. The voice of the Stoic within. Calm, clear, unmoved. A voice that does not beg for mercy, but breathes through the fire. A voice that says, let the world do what it will. I will do what I must. That's not arrogance. That's alignment with nature itself. Nature doesn't pause for trauma. Nature grows anyway, and so must you. Growth is not polite. It does not knock on your door with soft hands and comforting words. It breaks in through the ceiling. It shakes the walls. It pulls you out of bed at midnight and says, wake up. You're wasting your life. And in that moment you have two choices. Shrink back into the comfort of your cage, or rise into the cold, clear air of your calling. Because growth doesn't come when things are easy. Growth comes when you are tempted to break and choose to bend. When you are overwhelmed by pressure and choose precision instead of panic. When you are flooded by emotion and choose stillness over self-pity. That's the soul of Stoicism. That's the reason it still stands after thousands of years, while so many modern fads fade into dust. Because it doesn't cater to what you feel. Commands you to rise despite what you feel. And that's what your soul has been starving for. Not another explanation. Permission to fight back. You see, modern methods often offer soothing. But the Stoic path? It offers structure, discipline, alignment with what is timeless, not what is trending. And structure, not soothing, is what sustains the soul under real pressure. You weren't made to be constantly coddled. You were made to carry the weight of your world and walk anyway. Every hardship is your invitation to prove you are greater than it. Every disappointment is the arena in which your resolve is tested. Every betrayal is a lesson in self-respect, not self-destruction. Every delay, every failure, every sleepless night, it is not in your way. It is the way. That is the heart of Stoic living. You don't run from life. You let life refine you. You don't chase calm like it's something outside you. You become calm by mastering your internal storm. So if you're still waiting for the anxiety to disappear, if you're still hoping your trauma will one day dissolve like mist, if you're still counting on someone to come rescue you from the weight of who you are, stop and look in the mirror, because the rescuer you've been praying for is already in the room. It's the part of you that has survived everything. The part of you that gets back up. The part of you that's listening to this right now, not because it's easy to hear, but because it's true. You are more than your wounds. You are more than your labels. You are more than your doubt. You are what you do next. And if you choose to rise, not to impress, not to prove, but to align with virtue, then the war is already won. Because no one can take that from you. They can take your money, your comfort, your security, your titles, but they can never take the soul that rules itself. And that is why Stoicism will always outlast trends, therapies, ideologies. Because it is not built on comfort. It is built on truth. And the truth is this: you don't need to be saved. You need to remember who you are. You need to strip away the lies. You need to stand in the fire and whisper, "This is not the end of me." And from that whisper comes your rebirth. There is a silence that comes after fire. Not emptiness, certainty. It is the quiet that settles in the heart of a person who has faced themselves completely, stripped away all pretense, burned away every excuse, and stands now, exposed, unguarded, and yet unshaken. That silence is where the Stoic lives. Not above emotion, but beneath it, anchored, grounded, awake, no longer at the mercy of moods or memories, no longer held hostage by history. They do not ask the world to be fair. They do not need applause. They do not require understanding. They only ask one thing of themselves: to live in alignment with virtue. Everything else is noise. And if you listen closely, your soul already knows this. It always has. You were not built to crumble under pressure, you were built to channel it. You were not born to please the world, you were born to lead it, starting with yourself. So no, therapy isn't your enemy. Can help you look inward. But Stoicism? Stoicism teaches you how to look forward. To not only understand your pain, but to weaponize it into purpose. To not only process your trauma, but to transcend it with discipline. To not only feel your emotions, but to train them into obedience. You are not an open wound waiting for time to close it. You are a blacksmith, and your soul is your forge. Every hardship, fuel. Every heartbreak, hammer. Every fear, flame. Every failure, anvil. And when you work that fire long enough, something beautiful begins to emerge. Character. Not personality. Not image. Not facade. But character. The kind that holds fast when the storm hits. The kind that walks through betrayal without bitterness. The kind that meets death not with panic but with peace. That's the prize the Stoics aimed for. Not happiness. Not fame. Not freedom from pain. But freedom within pain. And if that is not the highest form of healing, what is? Because at some point you have to stop asking life to soften. You have to become stronger. You have to stop waiting for the past to stop hurting. And start building a present that cannot be shaken. The Stoics did not reject emotion, they refined it. They harnessed it. They stood before their own storms and said, "I will not drown here. I will stand. I will see clearly. I will act with virtue. And whatever comes, I will be unmoved." That is not denial. That is dominion. And that's what you've been craving this entire time. Not a softer world. A sharper soul. Not a life without pain. But a life where pain has no power over you. Because when you become unshakable, when you've looked fear in the eye and smiled, when you've stood in your own weakness and refused to collapse, when you've lost and lost and lost again, but never surrendered your integrity. Then you are free. Not because the world gave you peace, but because you took it, because you earned it, because you became it. This is where it ends, and where it begins. Not with applause, not with fanfare, not with someone else telling you, you've done enough, but with one final, irreversible decision, that from this moment forward, you are no longer at war with yourself. You are no longer blaming the world for the pain you carry. You are no longer waiting for the storm to pass. You are no longer measuring your progress by how healed you feel. You are done waiting. You have chosen the harder path, the older path, the unshakable path. You will rise in the cold. You will walk through fear. You will face grief with your back straight and your eyes wide open, because you are no longer here to be coddled. You are here to conquer, and not conquer others, not crush the world, but to rule yourself so completely that nothing outside of you can enslave your peace again. That is the gift of Stoicism. It does not give you fewer problems, it gives you greater power. It doesn't erase your wounds, it arms you with meaning. It doesn't soothe you with false hope, it forges you with fire and truth. This is not a philosophy of the weak. It is a discipline of warriors, of emperors who cried in private but led in public, of slaves who taught kings, of you, and the version of you that has been waiting to be unleashed. The version that doesn't need a couch to sit on. The version that doesn't need someone else to understand. The version that already knows who you are and what you're capable of, but has been buried under layers of doubt, softness, hesitation, and noise. Burn it all. Let the ashes of your former self fall away. And in that silence, step forward. Not as a product of your past, but as a master of your mind. Every sunrise from this point on is yours. Every challenge is a test you will pass. Every emotion is energy you will command. Every breath is a gift you will not waste. You are the fire. You are the discipline. You are the calm in chaos, the stillness in storm, the will in a world that has forgotten what willpower even means. So rise, walk, act, lead, and never again ask, am I enough? Because you are no longer looking for answers. You have become one. Now go, live as if you were sent by the ancients, because you were.